Hi, everybody. Rad Mom here. Welcome back to the garden, my happy place to talk about scary things, where today's guest is Rebecca Watson.
I just want the transphobes to know that this time I'm not replying to you because I don't respect you.
The SkepSick, which I can't say without sounding sarcastic because apparently clever branding is more important than feminist dignity. But whatever, that's old news. Really quick though, please like the video if you enjoy my content and subscribe to the channel so we can all work together to bring feminism back into the real world because we desperately need it. Rebecca's brand is mainly atheism and scientific commentary through that lens. So her commenting on the cast report is completely on brand. A brand she's using to push an agenda. And it could not be more obvious than it is right here. Because Rebecca is coming down hard on the side of trans kids.
For several months now, many of you have contacted me either on YouTube or Patreon asking me for my opinion on the Cass report.
That's a fun little humble brag about how people have been asking for her opinion for months. Nobody's been asking for my opinion on this, and I don't care because I'm going to continue speaking up anyway.
The independent review of gender identity services for children and young people, commissioned by the UK's National Health Services, was led by Hilary Cass, a past president of the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health. The Cass report took several years to compile, and the final version was published in April of this year. But prior to that, they had already released some preliminary findings, which the NHS has already used to guide some of their decision-making, like their decision to stop the use of puberty blockers in kids with gender dysphoria. And that's quite surprising, that the conclusions of the seemingly very detailed, nearly 400-page document was to recommend the exact opposite of the current standards.
It's only surprising if you believe that anybody is in the wrong body.
Because the Cass report recommended psychiatric care instead of medical interventions for kids with gender dysphoria, it was largely embraced by transphobes around the world.
Ooh, bias much?
Who cited it as proof that treating kids with gender dysphoria medically is ultimately some kind of child abuse.
You're right. It was embraced by transphobes because it demonstrates how medicalizing gender dysphoria amounts to child abuse. Yeah, which admittedly is a position a lot of us had before this came out.
And because I've talked in the past about the pretty solid scientific basis for the current consensus that gender-affirming care is good, actually.
Find me something that doesn't rely on the self-reported satisfaction of people whose very identity is built on this idea. People who demonstrate a soft grip on reality to begin with by deciding to pursue such a thing.
A lot of you were wondering if this report changed my mind. And I'll be honest, when I first heard about the Cass report, I definitely thought it was compelling. Yes, it ended up going against the existing scientific consensus, but it was coming from within the medical establishment, at least. Also, that scientific consensus isn't as solidified as it is in other fields for other topics.
Thank you for admitting that. What is it exactly that makes someone trans? You don't define it in this video, although you do heavily imply that you believe gender dysphoria makes a person trans, which is one position among many, right?
The way experts treat kids with gender dysphoria is still an emerging field, and it's not completely bonkers to imagine that new research might adjust the way the consensus leads.
She sounds unusually open-minded here, in an environment where we are told that trans people have always existed, and homophobic Frankenstein stuff is portrayed as revolutionary.
So I decided to read the report for myself.
She read it. I didn't. I don't need to read a 400-page medical paper to know that no one is in the wrong body.
And while it presents its findings as unbiased, it explicitly says it's not about rolling back people's rights to health care. That opening actually raised a little red flag for me, because why would that even need to be said? Oh, because, that's exactly what it has already led to with those preliminary findings, is the rolling back of some people's access to gender-affirming care.
One presumes the authors of the report did not consider puberty blockers for physically normal children to be healthcare.
Another big red flag for me was that the report claims that their systematic overview found little to no evidence for the benefit of puberty blockers, but they recommend a purely psychological approach instead, which has no evidence of benefit either. Not in this report and not in the past few centuries of attempting to treat gender dysphoria with therapy.
Claiming that psychotherapy is no better than puberty blockers, as far as results, is extremely disingenuous, right? It is preferable to refrain from modifying a child's body unless absolutely necessary.
In fact, in point 11.8 on page 158, the report reads, the University of York concluded that there is limited research evaluating outcomes of psychosocial interventions for children and adolescents experiencing gender incongruence, and low quality and inadequate reporting of the studies identified. Therefore, firm conclusions about their effects cannot be made.
And standards of psychotherapy are probably in the dirt right now because it's been vilified and pilloried for years.
Now, that's far less of a recommendation than the same report's summary on puberty blockers, which reads, in summary, there seems to be a very narrow indication for the use of puberty blockers in birth-registered males as the start of a medical transition pathway in order to stop irreversible pubertal changes. Other indications remain unproven at this time.
Puberty blockers block puberty. This does not indicate that they are the best treatment for psychological issues because no one is in the wrong body.
Okay, so if puberty blockers have some use cases according to their review, but psychological treatment alone has none, why are we recommending the latter and banning the former? The math just ain't mathin' for me.
Your finger is on the scale, and you are actually coming down on the side of turning healthy kids into medical patients.
Despite those red flags, I still didn't make a video about that report. Well, why is that? Simple. It's not my area of expertise. Also, not for nothing, but the thing is 388 pages. I do not have the attention span to be sure that I wasn't missing something.
I am not an expert. Well, it sounds a little like you're intimidated by the report. That's a rational response because, as you've said, it poses a serious challenge to this idea that if you're wrong, the implications are horrifying.
So I just cooled my heels and waited for the people who do have that expertise to weigh in.
So, let's hide behind an appeal to authority. Do you suppose she'll prove that anybody is in the wrong body?
First up, way back in March, I noticed the Cass review, Cis Supremacy and the UK's Approach to Healthcare for Trans Children by Cal Horton from Oxford.
Wow, there's a term, huh? Cis supremacy. We have another vocabulary word this week, you guys. What fun. This is the logical conclusion to the whole besieged minority thing. Don't support women's rights? Misogynist. Don't support the civil rights movement? Racist. White supremacist. Don't support trans rights? Well, you're a cis supremacist. The difference, of course, being that some people actually are female. Some people are black, but nobody is in the wrong body.
In that piece, published in the International Journal of Transgender Health, Horton argues that the report is inherently and blatantly biased, framed in a way that ignores transphobia and accepts ideas like there is no such thing as a trans child as a valid professional viewpoint and not a sign of deep prejudice.
I have yet to see any proof that there is such a thing as a trans child, and consider myself living evidence to the contrary. Not to mention that supporters of this stuff can't even agree what qualifies. There is no medical test for this medical condition, Rebecca.
While I found that paper interesting, I was pleased to recently see Biological and Psychosocial Evidence in the Cass Review, a critical commentary, published just this month in that same journal. In this dissection, Dori M. Greisels of the Max Planck Institute for Brain Research reveals some telling mistakes that I certainly never would have caught.
Going to so much trouble to try and discredit something so blatantly obvious. I smelled bias, right? So I went digging a little bit. The Max Planck Institute is also known as the German Scientific Institute, which was previously called the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. And Max Planck was president of it twice, and then they named it after him after he died. He was a theoretical physicist. So far so good. This author also co-authored something called Rigorous Science Demands Support of Transgender Scientists. Quote, To build a just, equitable, and diverse academy, scientists and institutions must address systemic barriers that sex and gender minorities face. What exactly is a sex minority? You mean intersex people? When did they enter the conversation? This commentary summarizes 1. Critical context informing the contemporary oppression of transgender people. 2. How this shapes extant research on sex and gender. 3. Actions to build an inclusive and rigorous academy for all. It sounds like transgender scientists demand the support of everyone else. Did you think flipping that in the title would hide this? So that is who Rebecca is citing here.
For instance, one large section of the Cass report argues for the frequency of mental disorders in young people seeking care. And to support that, Cass cites one study that reported data separately for 2012 and 2015 and demonstrated an increase in autism rates from 1.8% to 15.1%. But the study actually showed a non-significant increase from 13.8% to 15.1%. Just kind of dropped a little 3 there. Whoops.
The increase in autism rates in those diagnosed with gender dysphoria are inflated. Well, somebody should look into that. And maybe now they will, if it supports this narrative that some kids are in the wrong body.
Systematic reviews and meta-analyses are also about what studies are not cited. So here's one example of that. In point 8.14, the review cites Karamanis et al. As a large register-based population study to show that trans identity is mainly determined by environmental factors rather than having a genetic basis. However, this study included only 67 twins, and as such is much smaller than the numerous other studies which did find support for heritability of trans identity.
Heritability of trans identity is a leap when what you've got there, or are implying you've got there, because gender dysphoria is what makes a kid trans, right? Is evidence of heritability of gender dysphoria, which I readily accept, as temperamental stuff does work that way. You are suggesting some amazing biological quirk where somehow people are just born in the wrong body.
The review argues that this study gives more credence to the idea of sex hormone exposure in the womb causing gender dysphoria.
Creating what? A male with a feminine brain? Maybe the world needs some of those. Or a female with a masculine brain? Outliers. That's what they are. Unusual men and unusual women. Can we please stop pathologizing that?
Guy-Sales also addresses the weighting of the studies Cass does cite and the prioritizing of certain data from those studies over other data from the same studies. For instance, in discussing 4 studies on suicidality, 3 of them found that hormone treatments reduce suicidality, but Cass concluded that this evidence was too inconsistent and thus no benefit can be confirmed.
Find me evidence that doesn't rely on the self-report of the reality challenged.
Meanwhile, the report itself claims that evidence to date suggests that puberty blockers don't lead to substantially reduced adult height in transgender females. But just 1 page later, Cass concludes that blockers present this scary risk. Height gain may lag behind that seen in other adolescents.
In general, but not so much for females, which would mean mostly for males who have the most to lose there. It's almost like sex matters.
She consistently downplays any evidence of benefits.
They are dubious and should be regarded as such,
while highlighting risks that aren't really risks.
As a short person, I don't disagree. It's more about the effects on neurological development. The brain is a delicate thing, and we don't really understand it.
Now, if you read through Guy-Sales' paper, you might get to the end and think, wow, that's a lot of mistakes. I guess that means the Cass report is dead. I mean, you would think that if you've never once interacted with the rabid anti-science transphobic mob.
Aw, thanks for the mention, sweetie. I am doing you the courtesy of engaging with you as a media professional with a long background in scientific skepticism. That looks bad enough here, rather than coming at you as somebody sitting there insulting me, while you smugly insist that the unusual ones, the outliers, people like me, are somehow wrong and need medical treatment for it. Framing it as some kind of civil rights issue is disgustingly devious. And no study or report is ever going to help that.
Because no, they're going to be propping this up for years, which is why I'm grateful that the actual experts on this topic are going to just keep on kicking the Cass report while it's down.
But wait, there's more.
Guy Sales has joined forces with an international team of doctors and psychologists and gender and sexuality researchers, like some kind of queer Avengers,
from the same fervent believers in this insulting, destructive nonsense,
to publish another paper currently in preprint but available in full online, and it is even more damning. They actually use the risk of bias tool recommended by Cochrane, which, as you may know, is like the king of systematic reviews, to see if there's an objective measure of whether or not Cass was unfairly biased against trans care. And sure enough, they identified a high risk of bias in each of the systematic reviews.
Gotcha. They're biased against trans care. Reality is biased against trans care because no one is in the wrong body. That is not possible.
Now, if you're wondering why a systematic review this biased and poorly edited would be written, accepted, published, and used to guide public policy, the report fails to reveal everyone who collaborated on it, but a blogger discovered that representatives from the Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine, which the Southern Poverty Law Center has dubbed the hub of the anti-LGBT pseudoscience network.
Hang on. Anti-LGBT pseudoscience. What is anti-gay science? Being gay does not require any medical treatment, and actual science is anti-trans.
Were apparently members of the NHS Working Group on Gender Dysphoria. And Zinnia Jones found court documents showing that Cass herself met with Patrick Hunter, a DeSantis appointee to the Florida Board of Medicine, a member of SEGM, and big proponent of banning gender-affirming medical care for transgender youth.
Going in, trying to demonstrate this is, strictly speaking, unscientific. Brava, Rebecca. It still doesn't prove anyone is in the wrong body. But I have to wonder, if engaging with this stuff on this level hasn't just served to legitimize it. They demand objectivity while showing none. It's just an elaborate dodge by a bunch of well-heeled trolls. And they are eating like kings from this, apparently.
Hunter sent Cass materials from Florida's thoroughly discredited 2022 review of gender medicine, and then they became best buddies, and weird, both of their reports ended up with the same conclusions.
Cass agreed with American conservatives. Don't sit there and act like British people understand the nuances of American politics. We all know they don't.
And then they became best buddies, and weird, both of their reports ended up with the same conclusions.
They became best buddies? Did he take her to Disney World? He probably gets a discount, right? No, it says they invited her to a presentation. That's lame. Cass, you got robbed, honey. Those men are not our friends.
Now, I left all of this info till the end of this video because I didn't want you to cry that I'm poisoning the well.
No, you're hiding behind the attempts of others to poison the well. So you saved the big ad hominem reveal for the end. That's good writing. Especially with all that foreshadowing you did.
It was largely embraced by transphobes around the world. The Cass report isn't wrong because of the fact that Cass colluded with pseudoscientific transphobes. It's wrong because it mischaracterizes the science in a multitude of ways that actual experts have deconstructed repeatedly now.
You can't be an expert in trans healthcare any more than you can be an expert in unicorns.
The pseudoscientific transphobic collusion is just a hint as to why the report ended up this way. I'll be interested to see if the Cass report gets edited to fix any of the problems brought up. There's not much they can do about the rampant bias, but a defense would certainly be interesting at this point.
I am not here to offer you that. I know you appreciate Occam's razor, Rebecca, so I'll put it this way. Which explanation is simpler? That some people are somehow born in the wrong body, or that some people believe that they were?
You know, it's a total coincidence, but the last few times that I've put out a video defending the consensus on medical treatment of children and young people with gender dysphoria, I've been on vacation at the time that the video goes public. And I always come home like a week later, you know, from being like off the internet. And I just have this litany of angry replies from TERFs and other transphobes who are angry that I'm not responding to them. And they're assuming it's because like I'm disrespecting them and not because, I was relaxing on a beach somewhere. But this time, for the first time, I actually do not have a vacation scheduled. I'll be home when this video goes live. So I just want the transphobes to know that this time I'm not replying to you because I don't respect you.
That much is evident. Pretty strong words for someone insisting weird kids need medical treatment.
Not because I'm on the beach.
But apparently she's not. Interested in a rebuttal? I don't especially respect you either, but I make it a rule to not just sit here and call people names. Fortunately, you went so far out on this thin, rickety, Emperor's New Clothes limb that all I have to do is shake the tree just a little bit. You are not being very skeptical here. Your feminism consists of pinup calendars and controversy, and your skepticism accepts that some people are in the wrong body because they say so. You sit there smugly throwing accusations of bias when lying to yourself is the only way you can possibly be so cocky about this. No one is in the wrong body. Leave the weird kids alone. So this has been our little visit with Rebecca Watson, the SkepCick. I have been Rad Mom. Thank you for joining me out here in the garden, my happy place to talk about scary things. Come back at the top of the hour for the live stream and discussion, and let's share our stories about being weird kids. Okay, I'll see you then, and next week with a new video. Cool, thanks. Bye.